Hello, Internet. I'm Daniel, and I want to thank you for cruising the back roads of Central Alabama with me while we talk TTRPGs on Driving and Dragons. Today, I'm bringing a new YouTube trend to the TTRPG world, but first, let's handle the housekeeping. I want to take a moment to thank my supporters, particularly all those over on Patreon, as well as the incredibly generous fellow who donated the Dodge Dart to the channel. So Aaron, Dave, Trenton, Joe, and Ronald, I appreciate you for helping make big things happen here on the channel. If you haven't done so already, click subscribe. Then either head over to Patreon or click that join button here on YouTube if you like what you see and you want to join the names mentioned above in supporting the content I create. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it. And regardless of how you feel, let me know in the comments. I always get some fantastic comments and really thought-provoking discussion on my videos, but even if you just want to inform me of how you don't like that I called someone a mean name, hey, the algorithm likes that too, so it is an airport. Inform us of your departure. Maybe even have an argument or two on your way out. Now that we have all that taken care of, what is this YouTube trend? Well, a few weeks ago, a hip-hop music channel dropped a video that has been going semi-viral in that community called the 7 Levels of Rapper, which booktuber Daniel Green copied with 7 Levels of Fantasy, which is what landed it in my feed. I found it interesting. It has a little different spin on the stock standard list video by being a kind of interesting amalgamation of list, top 10, and iceberg video. So I decided to do one for tabletop role-playing games. This is the 7 levels of TTRPG games. I will be talking about the games themselves here from a design standpoint, a market penetration standpoint, and a value to the hobby as a whole standpoint. It isn't just a sales or popularity contest, nor is it a tortured artist pity party where the label indie instantly elevates a game 3 levels. It's also my opinion and how I see things, so feel free to jump in the comments and tell me about how I'm on level 1 for mentioning a popular YouTuber's game in a lower tier or for putting an edition of Dungeons & Dragons higher than you'd like. One last thing before we get started, you won't find a ton of examples in every tier. I've got a few of them out there for most of the tiers. For one, especially in the lowest tier, many of these games find themselves low because they were such failures that they never went anywhere. Also, because this is a niche market hobby and it's a very tiny niche, I don't want to come across as trying to trash some small indie designer's work. But there will be some exceptions, mind you, but as a general rule, I didn't go digging and hunting to pad out the outrage clicks. This also isn't a Daniel's favorite games ranked list. Several games I really enjoy would land on a lower level than games that I have a strong dislike for. So keep that in mind and understand that with the exception of the lowest levels, there's a decent amount of value and fun that you can find in each tier. So let's do this. Level 1, story games and non-games. First things first, don't confuse story games with narrative games or storytelling games. These are not the same thing. I'm a narrative game master myself. The reason story games is here is because a story game is a non-game. These are games that don't have rule structures or systems that can really be utilized on their own. Virtually the entire system is a collection of improv prompts designed for the game master to make it up on the fly. Ironically, these games are bad because while the game master is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for essentially designing mechanics on the fly, the game master is seen as completely secondary by the publishers of these games, either by design as in story games, or naturally because a game is so busted that a GM is building off of the idea of a concept. These games prioritize the story designed by the publisher, then the player's role, and then maybe the game master. And why is this so bad? Why is it at level 1? Because it not only emphasizes, it makes it inescapable to use some of the worst game master habits. We say it all the time. GM, it's not your novel. You aren't writing a story for the players to live out. You're running a world for them to develop stories in. In level 1 games, the GM is relegated to making rules and decisions that serve some nebulous concept that is set forth by the game publisher. Because either it is a story game and Rule 0 is basically the only rule, or because it is so poorly developed that it's basically Calvin ball and all you really have to work with is it's a game about saving people trapped on space stations, I think. Imagine being handed a paperback book and told, here's your game. Find a way to make your players be these characters in this story. Level 2, phoned in slop. Well, at least they tried. That's the refrain from the more generous and aggressively positive reviewers of Level 2 games. Sometimes it is a complete lack of resources. It's one guy with limited or no funds, no formal training, and no real natural gifts for art, writing, world building, or design, just trying to make a dream come true. The art sucks because the designer can't even draw a stick figure and can't craft decent AI prompts. The layout is crap because he doesn't even have basic software nor any idea what the principles behind layout and publication are. The game has glaring errors because there's almost no time or willing players to truly playtest it. Sometimes it's just pure laziness, an entire edit of good enough. Playtesting that consists of rolling out a couple of combats on the desk in front of the keyboard and saying, well, yeah, that worked. A desire to exploit something as cheaply as possible and deciding that getting your The Shadow TTRPG on the market the day that The Shadow hits public domain is far more important than having a playable game or even making sure that all the art is actually The Shadow and not some other gray ghost or something. This is the section where we find our first example, and I think we all know what it is. It's the Neo TTRPG system by Stephen Condor DM Saunders. Games on Level 2 are often passion projects that suffer from a lack of skill, organization, and project management, or simply an unhealthy dose of laziness. Sometimes there is the seed of a good concept in these games. Neo TTRPG, for instance, has a mildly interesting setting in Skullhorn that could be a great campaign setting with a little organization and attention to detail. The big thing about Level 2 is that 90% of the issues could be corrected with small investments of time and or money. $70 to download Affinity Publisher. A few hours watching YouTube videos on game design principles, layout, AI art prompts, or even just task management. These things would all vastly improve the products found on Level 2. This is also where you find adventure modules and campaign settings that showed up looking like the next Forgotten Realms, Greyhawk, Night City or Hyboria, and surprise, ended up being hard work. Hard work that the guy with the idea decided he would rather not do, so his module or campaign setting is basically unplayable. May as well write a fantasy prehistory of Earth with immortal elves and men fighting a dark lord who has a mountain stronghold, write that down on a napkin, and then sell it through DriveThruRPG. Level 3, clones and copies. This level is largely self-explanatory. This is where the vast majority of TTRPGs fall, and it is the overwhelming bulk of OSR games. It also happens to be the first level that I would say you should consider purchasing something, as it is the first level where you find quality products. And make no mistake, there are some very, very high quality products in Level 3. White Box from the Basic Expert comes to mind. My personal feelings on Expert aside, there is no denying that he puts out top quality products. White Box is a well put together work that's as good as any major publisher's work. And the artwork and the writing are top notch. However, there's also no denying that it's just D&D basic. It's the original game repackaged. Same could be said for Damsels, Adventurers, and Dragons, that I had featured here on the channel. It's 2E D&D. He added a few things, polished the layout and the writing, and made a few quality of life adjustments, and added a couple of ideas. But it's second edition Dungeons and Dragons. This is also where a lot of D20 system games end up, as well as products that aren't really new games so much as well executed homebrew. A lot of your Bro SR adjacent stuff lands here as well, with things like the Old Lords. Games that aren't so much new games as new or different ways to approach old classics. I guess another term for level 3 would be the level with the serial numbers scrubbed off. I'd be tempted to put games like Castles and Crusades, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and Mort here, but given that they all kind of qualify as spiritual successors, but they could easily fit in the higher tiers as well. And that's the thing about levels 3, 4, and 5. You'll see that there's a lot of room to argue that some games equally belong in all three. Level 4 are idea mines and genre games. On this level, we start seeing the first vestiges of a true, complete game design. This is where decisions were made to serve an overall vision. Level 4 sci-fi games... Now, our level 4 sci-fi game is not just a modified BX rule set with some random planet and spaceship tables. It's a sci-fi game, where each decision about a feature or mechanic was made with the sole purpose of fostering the player's immersion in a sci-fi world. What makes these games fall short of the higher levels is largely two things: success and adaptability. This is where not just sales, but presence in the market and the conversation in TTRPG circles comes into play. Games like RuneQuest or Tunnels and Trolls are fantastic games, but we're always in the shadow of D&D. Just like the Dollar General version, if you ask some players who don't know better. It's also where you have the genre-specific games like your Top Secret, your Gamma World, Cyberpunk Red, as well as your OSR games like Baptism of Fire and Lion and Dragon that are OSR games, but not so much TSR D&D with a shot code of primer, but games built off of a D&D core with old school sensibilities. Level 4 is also where you're going to find what I'm calling the idea mines, kind of like level 2 on steroids. Level 2, I said there may be a good idea or a great concept that just was never developed or it was completely overshadowed by the lack of quality workmanship surrounding it. But here on level 4, you find numerous good ideas to steal for your own use that may have had some thought and effort put into it, at very least in their presentation. Things like Daggerheart or Draw Steel that may not be very good games in their own right, but do have a few gimmicks or ideas that might fill a void in a much better game. The long and short of level 4 is that these are either games that are not top shelf or sometimes even fully functional, but have a lot of interesting concepts or mechanics, or they're great games that are so tailored to a specific playstyle or genre that they lack flexibility. Level 5, trend setters. This is where you find most of your major publisher games. They are polished, well marketed, and stand out such that they are always mentioned by name, or at least they are always mentioned by name in the era they came out in. It's common parlance in TTRPG world to use D&D as a stand-in for basically every fantasy genre game, and even games in other genres get the "it's like D&D except" treatment. As Professor DM says, D20 roll high 6 stats with classes, you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. These are games that don't get that treatment. When you want to play Shadowdark, you don't say, "we're playing D&D" to normies. You say, "we're playing Shadowdark." And it's ironic considering that Shadowdark arguably fits in both level 3 and 4 as an OSR-influenced, heavily modified 5th edition D&D game. 2nd edition D&D, BX or D&D Basic, Vampire the Masquerade, Shadowrun, and Traveler all belong here. These are games that carved their own niche in their respective eras and pulled firmly away from the pack. You might ask why I specified certain editions of D&D. Well, that's easy, because the next two levels are not like level 3 through 5. There isn't a lot of argument about what belongs there. They are very distinct, and for my dollar, they're in leagues all their own. Level 6, system defining. When your game is the mechanical basis for the games in the levels below, that is a completely different standing. The games on level 6 are not just games. They are complex and complete rule systems, so complete and adaptable that you may have even bought games that you never realized were built around the framework of a level 6 game. The clones clone these games. The idea mines in genre games are generally efforts to adapt these rule sets to more effectively facilitate play in a specific genre or style. The trendsetters are often offshoots or less hobby-shaping editions of these games. This is your 3.5 or 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons with its revolutionary D20 system. This is 5th edition D&D with its monumental popularity and ease of adaptation. This is Cyberpunk 2020 with the interlock system using the D10 that can easily be used for any style or genre with equal efficiency and virtually no adaptation. This is Call of Cthulhu as the first and last word in skill-based advancement and its unique ability to facilitate gritty, realistic feel to character progression. Basically, if your game has a recognized rule set that often gets used as shorthand in interviews with other designers, you're at level 6. Tell us about your game, Mr. Designer. Well, streamer dude, it's a D20 system game. Or, it uses the D100 skill-based system. Conversations like that, level 6. Love them or hate them, these games are so pivotal and so core to the inner workings of the entire TTRPG hobby that a healthy percentage of players know the game simply by mentioning the rules. If you tell somebody that you roll a D20 and you're playing a fantasy game, they immediately go to D&D. If you say D20 system, they immediately think Dungeons & Dragons. If you say D100 roll under, the first thing they think is, oh, it's like Call of Cthulhu. Level 7, bespoke work. Here we are at last. Level 7. I put 2 things at this highest level. The first is pretty nebulous, and I can't really think of an example off the top of my head. I almost put Call of Cthulhu here because as at its launch, it really did kind of fit. And I guess there's also an argument for GURPS or Traveler. These are truly bespoke, fully functional, completely unique works that are derivative only in the fact that math is math and dice are dice and RPGs are RPGs. They are true works of art that may or may not have commercial success, but are undeniable successes in terms of developing elegant and robust rule systems that players can rely on to create long-lasting, meaningful, and entertaining experiences. This is the Columbo V12. This is the small block Chevy, the 426 Hemi, the 427 Side Oiler, the 2J fan car, the Turbine Chrysler. To be level 7 means that something truly unique has been created, and when it gets passed around respected game designers, they look at it like an art critic would look at a Monet, or like an engineer looks at a Formula One race car. That's what it means to be level 7. Or it means that the game is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, 1st edition. If AD&D were a game that was created today, it would fall firmly either in level 4 or level 5, depending on how you choose to approach it. But it is the game that invented the genre. I'm well aware that we had years of vanilla Dungeons & Dragons first, but AD&D was when Gary Gygax first brought his ultimate vision to life and truly created the TTRPG hobby. There are much better games. Hell, there's much better Dungeons & Dragons than AD&D. But AD&D was created whole cloth out of nothing. There was no TTRPG that existed to build off of it. There was, some miniature war games like Chainmail. I mean, there's the Bronstein concept and, a few little things that are kind of TTRPG adjacent, but there was no TTRPG to build AD&D off of. And newer games may be higher up than AD&D, but that's only because AD&D is the giant on whose shoulders that they're all standing. So how could it be anywhere except level 7? That's it, guys. 7 levels of TTRPGs. What'd you think? Where was I right? Where was I wrong? Let me know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time.